He does not want to accept his defeat. Donald Trump attacks the prosecutors who are investigating him in front of a cheering crowd of his supporters. Concerns about new unrest are growing in the United States. After former US President Donald Trump verbally attacked investigators, concerns about riots are growing. According to media reports, the district attorney of Fulton County in the state of Georgia contacted the federal police FBI. We must work together to keep the public safe and to ensure that Atlanta does not experience a tragedy similar to the Capitol on January 6th in 2021, several US media outlets quoted on Monday as saying from a letter from prosecutor Fani Willis. The prosecutor is investigating Trump for allegations of improper manipulation of the election. The background to this is, among other things, a call from the president, who had already been voted out at the time, to Brett Raffensperger, the state secretary responsible for the elections in Georgia at the beginning of January 2021. At the time, Trump openly called on Raffensperger to collect enough votes for his electoral success in the state. The Republican continues to refuse to concede his defeat in the November 2020 election. Trump spoke of radical and malicious prosecutors in Texas over the weekend. If they do something illegal, he hopes there will be the biggest protest in this country that we've ever had in Washington, D.C., in New York, in Atlanta, and elsewhere. The prosecutors were after him. Actually, they are not after me, they are after you, he said to the cheering crowd. After an inciting speech by Trump, his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol a year ago already. A jury in Georgia is scheduled to consider the allegations in early May. In her letter to the FBI, Prosecutor Willis now expressed security concerns about the appointment. Several investigations are underway in the United States against Trump. The British Department for Transport is introducing a passenger rights reform that would not be possible without leaving the EU, they say. It differs fundamentally from the EU passenger regulation and improves the position of consumers, they claim. According to the British Business Traveller, the Ministry of Transport emphasizes that the planned strengthening of air passenger rights was only possible as a result of leaving the EU. The key is fairer compensation for domestic flight delays based on the UK rail and ferry compensation model. According to this, passengers would receive a refund of 25% for delay of more than 1 hour, 50% for a delay of more than 2 hours, and a full refund for a delay of more than 3 hours. They should read the new EU rules there, by the way. The British Department of Transport is thus moving away from the EU 261 passenger regulation, which is currently also recognized by Great Britain. The EU passenger regulation currently provides for compensation for delays of 3 hours or more at the earliest, which is calculated depending on the flight route and amounts to between 250 and 600 euros. The DfT is also considering whether it should oblige all airlines to join the Alternative Dispute Resolution Arbitration Board. Membership is currently voluntary. Other consumers' rights, such as damage to wheelchairs and more rights for the British Aviation Authority (CAA), are also on the reform agenda. For example, the future CAA could be entitled to impose fines directly on the airlines if they violate consumers' rights. The air passenger rights reform proposals can be viewed and commented on by every Brit until March 27th. Only then does the prescribed path through Parliament begins as usual. The Taliban announced a general amnesty after taking power in Afghanistan, but a UN report now shows in black and white that there is not much truth to the promise. According to this UN report, the radical Islamic Taliban have killed more than 100 former government employees and local international troops in Afghanistan since taking power last August. Despite the announcement of a general amnesty for government and armed forces employees, the UN has received credible allegations of killing and forced disappearances said UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in a report on Sunday. According to the report, more than 2/3 of these killings were extrajudicial killings committed by the de facto authorities or their allies. In addition, human rights defenders and media workers continue to face attacks, intimidation, harassment, arbitrary arrest, ill treatment, and killings. The report also highlights the Taliban's crackdown on peaceful protests and the lack of access for women and girls to jobs and education. Since their return to power, the radical Islamic Taliban have been more moderate than during their first rule from 1996 to 2001. The country is caught in a serious humanitarian crisis. According to the UN, more than half of the population will starve this winter. Relations between Mali and the West are already strained. Now comes the next endurance test. A diplomat has to leave the West African country. The military junta in the West African crisis country of Mali, where the German Bundeswehr is also active, is putting the already tense relations with the West to another endurance test. The ambassador of the former colonial power France had been expelled from the country, according to a statement on state television on Monday. Ambassador Joël Meyer was informed about this when he was summoned to the foreign ministry in Bamako. Meyer must leave the country within 72 hours, the military rulers said in a statement. Their relationship with the former colonial power France and the entire West had increasingly deteriorated in recent months. The junta not only cancelled the elections originally planned for February, but is also working increasingly closely with so-called Russian military advisors. France and the USA, among others, accused the military junta of allowing itself to be supported by Russian mercenaries from the so-called Wagner Group under the guise of fighting terrorism. Under President François Hollande, France sent soldiers to Mali in 2013 to stop the advance of jihadist militias. His successor Emmanuel Macron has tried to involve Mali's neighboring countries and other European countries in the fight against the jihadist militias. Several international military operations are currently overlapping in Mali, including a UN mission and an EU training mission. The Bundeswehr is also involved in both, with a total of up to 1,700 soldiers. France has by far the most soldiers deployed in Mali of any Western country. 2 years after leaving the EU, the British government celebrates the benefits of Brexit in a 108-page report. In part on the progress made so far, the document released on Monday mentions, among other things, the reintroduction of our iconic blue passport, as well as the freedom to have a special crown emblem, the so-called crown stamp, to imprint. It is also positively emphasized that the British Supreme Court, instead of EU courts as before in some cases, has the last word in legal disputes, with judgments in English, not French. The fact that EU citizens are no longer allowed to enter the country with ID cards but only with passports is another Brexit benefit for Boris Johnson's Conservative government. It has also been made more difficult for criminals from the EU to gain access to the kingdom. I don't see the difference between the ID card and the passport, and I can get both easily here. Great Britain formally left the EU on January 31st in 2020. However, until the end of 2020, there was still a transitional phase with largely the same rules as before. In 2021, the British also left the European Union's customs union and internal market. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.